The second one is the hinge. Now the hinge we're gonna think about as deadlifts or RDLs or remaining deadlifts or single leg deadlifts or anything that's gonna make it so that your hips are moving and your knees are moving, but both joints are moving in conjunction with each other. But more importantly, the hips are the primary movers here with the hinge. So let's look at the hinge and how it's important, because the hinge is something that we do again from a day-to-day multiple times throughout the day. And if you can learn how to do the hinge properly, you'll help keep your lower back safe so you're not straining and throwing your back out from time to time by doing regular exercises or regular everyday movements like picking up your kids, like bending down to pick up groceries. Now, when we're thinking about the hinge, we're also gonna look at the foot position, the hip position, the knee position, and everything else we discussed in the squats as well. But we're gonna do it a little bit of a different setup. So when we're starting with the hinge, we wanna position our feet at shoulders width or hips width, just so we have a nice strong base before we get into it. Your toes should be facing forward. That way with the hinge, everything is even with your hips and your glutes as you move through this hinge. Now, here's an important factor when we start to move with our hinge. I want you to think about the correlation between your hip and your knees. So the further back your hips go in the hinge, the more you'll be able to bend your knees. But this is not a squat. The difference between the two is that a squat is maximum hip bend and maximum knee bend, whereas the hinge is maximum hip bend with minimal knee bend. So if we can think about that as we go through the hinge, we'll have a much more effective and efficient hinge that will translate into deadlifts, RDLs, and any other hinging movements that are not squat focused, but posterior, hip, glute, and hamstring focused. So we'll start with our feet, making sure that our feet are at shoulders width or hips width apart, having our feet facing forward. We're still gonna have that tripod foot method set in our feet so that all 3 points are connected to the ground. The next thing is to make sure that your feet are aligned evenly so that one foot isn't behind or in front of the other one. And then we're gonna set our hips. What I want you to do before starting your hinge is make sure that you have an entire body full posture lockout. So let's practice this and do this with me right now. I want you to get into your position with your feet. We're gonna start by locking out your knees, squeezing your quads, squeezing your glutes, pulling your core in tight, tucking your pelvis under itself to stack under your rib cage, pulling your shoulders back and down and pinching your armpits in tight so your arms are at the side of your body. Lastly, pulling your head back and chin tucked in. Looking at the hinge, we want to think neutral spine. And the way we teach that here at Bench on Better as part of our programs is by looking at 3 key points of your back and our spine to keep it neutral. The way we teach that is with the back of your head touching the dowel, the back of your shoulders touching the dowel, and your tailbone touching the dowel. When all 3 points are connected on the dowel, we know we have a nice neutral spine that will keep us safe with every movement going forward. Great, now that we've gone through the whole setup for how to properly go through your hinge, I want you to take another video from the front, from the side, and from the back so you can compare how you're moving and how much better you feel and look in this movement so you can create more confidence, more stability, and more strength as we move forward in this process. Next, we'll go into the plank.